Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Software Defined Everything, the podcast for smart world systems. I'm your host, Steven Onzo, and today we're talking about smart agriculture, an industry that doesn't always get the spotlight like autonomous vehicles on the road, but it's big, it's growing fast, and I'm sure there are many similarities. And joining me today are Nancy Post and Thomas Bloor. Thomas is the Director of Automotive here at RTI. He plays a big role in shaping our strategy across not just automotive, but also our agriculture, construction, and mining industries. And our special guest today, Nancy Post. Nancy's a seasoned tech leader and trusted advisor. She's currently a senior advisor at Boston Consulting Group and also sits on RTI's advisory board. Before that, she spent nearly 30 years at John Deere, where she focused on using technology to deliver real value to customers. She's got a ton of experience in scaling complex innovations, and we're thrilled to have her with us today. Nancy, to kick us off, can you give us a quick overview of where the agriculture industry stands as of today in terms of tech adoption? And are there any examples that stand out where technology is making a big difference right now?
So many examples. You guys will ask me to quit talking, I think, but I would just tell you that we want to start with the purpose. So if you think about where the world is going and the population growth that'll happen by, say, 2050, the estimate is around 10 billion. You wouldn't be able to produce enough food to feed all of those people if you were not leveraging technology, including automation, AI, and all the things that come with technology. And so one of the most exciting technologies I think that's out there right now is something that John Deere has introduced in the last few years, and that is See and Spray. This is a system that has 36 cameras on a 120-foot sprayer boom. It's going through the field at up to 12 miles an hour, and it's detecting the difference between a crop and a weed, and it's only spraying the weed in the size of a postage stamp spray. So imagine all of the herbicides and pesticides that could be saved with a system like that. And they estimate it's up to close to 70% of savings. That's not only good for the farmer because it saves them a lot of money, of course, and creates better profitability at the end of the year, but it's really good for the environment and for the being stewards of the land, which is so important to our farming customers. The other thing that I think is really a big deal for people in or farmers in technology is that when they're working in the field in the planting season and in harvesting season, most people don't know they're working 16, 18-hour days. And this technology really does help them with that productivity. It also helps them very much with ease of use. You only have so many father-in-laws who have spent 50, 60 years planting and harvesting to pull on from a labor pool. All this technology really helps with that challenge. And maybe one last thing to mention is that John Deere has put in fully autonomous tillage vehicles into production at this point. And so imagine you've got a map of a field and you're running through that field with a vehicle, a very large, high horsepower vehicle that's tilling for you, and there's not a person in it. So I know people are super impressed by the fact that we've got some automation in automotive. What's happening in ag, a lot of people would be very surprised at how much is going on and how much time it's saving and the efficiency of our overall operations that it's providing.
Yeah, certainly a lot of things going on behind the scenes there. Thomas, from your perspective at RTI, what are some of the unique challenges that come with deploying tech in ag environments, especially when you think about the huge range of systems and the equipment that's involved?
I think the challenges are very different from mainstream automotive customers, right? In some ways, the problem's actually easier, right? I mean, Nancy just said, right? I can have an autonomous tractor or vehicle in a field, and that's really quite nice from an autonomy perspective, right? Because it's a closed field, right? I don't have to worry about pedestrians. I don't have to worry about other road users or decide, how are these people going to react. I don't have to do path planning in the same way that I would do from a passenger vehicle autonomy perspective, right? Obviously, I don't want to hit an animal that might be in that environment. So there are different criteria, but in some ways the problem set is easier because it's a bit more defined, right? On the other hand, you need a lot of precision, right? If you're, harvesting a crop and you miss, a 3 to 5 centimeter pass on these huge fields that we have in North America, you're actually wasting a lot of crops, right? You're wasting a lot of your efficiency there. And so, we have in some ways an easier set, but in other ways we need a much, much higher degree of precision to be able to, plow those fields and till those fields with absolute precision. The other thing is that, we might be in a very remote area, right? A lot of autonomous vehicles in urban settings, rely on connectivity. So if they get into a problem, they hand off into sort of a remote operator or a teleoperator to tell them what to do until they can take back over. If an autonomous agricultural vehicle is out in the field and it runs into a problem, it may not have that luxury, right? So there has to be some other way or some other reaction from that vehicle to mitigate that circumstance and then get going again afterwards. So, the problems are different, but they're not always easier, but some of the different problems are quite challenging.
I'm curious, what's something that surprises you most about the state of ag today? Are there big differences across different regions? And if there are, which countries or areas are we seeing that are leading the innovation? We'll start with you, Nancy.
There is a really big difference in the size of farms. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges. You have to serve the customer that has 200 acres, and you have to serve the customer that has close to 1 million acres, which I was looking this up just recently, and I was surprised to see that even in the US, we've got several big farms that are hundreds of thousands of acres. And so there are technologies that really serve all the customers. A great example of that would be AutoTrack. We've had self-steering in production since 2020, so 25 years. And we put that in production thinking that you would reduce the overlap and you would add all this productivity, you'd reduce inputs and maximize outputs like we always want to do because you're focused on the customer. And then in the end, it was this ease of use. It was this thing that the customers needed when they're under so much stress. And so that applies across all customer bases. And so I really feel like the soil and weather and all those things that vary in every area of different countries, Brazil, the United States, Germany, the size of farms, the weather, all of those things have to be considered when you're creating technology. You have to serve that entire customer base. So the challenge is big, but if you keep what you want the outcome to be for the customer in mind, you can create technology that is super value and has a lot of purpose.
Thomas, what are your thoughts on that?
I think what surprises me is the variety of technologies that are being applied and the rate of adoption, right? I think, the value that is being provided by, things like See and Spray and some of these other technologies that are coming in are being recognized by the industry. And that's driving quite a fast adoption. To go to Nancy's point about the size of farms coming from the UK, right? I think the average farm in the UK is a couple of 100 acres.
Mm-hmm.
And that drives is quite different. I mean, we think of farming in North America, right? We think of the prairies, right? Wide open spaces, huge flat fields. In the UK, very small. Actually, Europe as well, right? France, places like that. Smaller fields, often on sort of hillier type terrain. And the other factor that comes in there is access to those fields, right? You might have access to a field down a single track road with, big bushes or hedges down either side, right? So it impacts the size of machinery that can get into those areas as well. Not necessarily the technology that gets applied. That technology can be applied to just machinery that is smaller in size, so it can physically access those fields.
One thing we hear a lot about right now is precision agriculture. How widely is it actually being used? And is there a clear ROI for this to be scaled across different types of farms and different types of environments, Thomas?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, precision, I mentioned before, right? And precision agriculture is important, right? Because if you miss a small strip, you're impacting your productivity. And in North America, scale across thousands of acres, that has a really big impact, right? I mean, at the end of the day, the whole point of adopting these technologies is to drive productivity and get a more profitable farming, venture at the end of the day. So absolutely, it's very, very important. I think you mentioned scalability as well, right? And scalability is really a question about cost, right? And there's kind of two sides to that equation. Like, firstly, agriculture by nature of the market is smaller than sort of mainstream passenger vehicles. However, a lot of the sensors are the same, right? See and Spray uses cameras, right? Cameras are used on virtually every car you can buy out there now, right? So they can piggyback on the sort of economies of scale on some of the broader automotive markets, and that helps drive cost down.
Nancy, what are your thoughts on how precision agriculture is being used currently today?
Precision ag is very highly adopted, especially in large ag. The core of that system is GPS technology or navigation. And you have to have that so you know exactly where that vehicle is at that time and exactly where every seed is planted. The ability to know where you're at, and at John Deere at the receiver, it's 2.5 centimeters. So that precision is much greater than, of course, the precision of your technology on your phone or something like that. You know where that vehicle is. You want to know where every seed is planted. You have a map that is coming down from the cloud. So you have to have telematics. So those are a couple of the very critical technologies that have to be on every vehicle so that you can, each time through the field, you know exactly what you've done and you can improve the next pass or really improve the next year's productivity. Because the main point with this precision tech is to reduce inputs and maximize outputs to make the customer more profitable so that they can afford, and it's actually an ROI improvement to buy that equipment because it makes their business better.
There's one big commonality with smart agriculture and autonomous vehicles I see, and that's the abundance of data. Data seems to be at the heart of smart agriculture, but how exactly is it being gathered and how exactly is it being used, especially in some of the more remote and rugged areas where connectivity could be really challenging? Nancy, do you want to start us off?
Yeah. So as you're running through the field, there's a lot of internal systems. There's dozens of controllers on a piece of equipment and many more depending on the equipment you're running. And there's closed loop control, there's data that's being pulled from sensors. It's informing the operator as you go through the field, but then it's being sent offline in order to draw insights that can help the customer to improve their operations overall. And so if you're not in an area where there is connectivity, then it stores all that information and ships it off through the telecommunications device, whether that would be mobile technology or in some cases satellite, or in the future will be satellite. That's how you get that information up into the cloud and to draw the insights. And then as you're informing the operator of what's happening, if you could have continuous connectivity, I really do believe that we don't even understand what that would do for our customers. So you could take care of logistic challenges and you could have all kinds of even greater capabilities if we had continued capability, but we don't because of the remote locations of many farms, especially in countries like Brazil and some of the other countries that aren't as advanced in their infrastructure.
Right. Thomas, what are your thoughts around how data is being gathered and used in smart agriculture?
I agree with Nancy, right? I mean, there's an awful lot of data being collected as we move forward, right? Sensors will be able to collect more and more data. I mean, I think that data is most useful over the longer term when it's moved up into the cloud, right? So when connectivity is available, we can move that data to the cloud. I think that problem is kind of reasonably well understood, right? In terms of storing data on a vehicle and moving it to the cloud when connectivity is available. So I don't think there's too many issues with that. We have vehicle-to-vehicle communications as well, right? So vehicles will share data as they move around the field. You think about some of the applications for automated agriculture in harvesting, for example, right? Hey, I've got a combine harvester or a fleet of combine harvesters going across the field, and I want to coordinate with the trucks coming in that pick up the grain off those combines, right? So that is a very sort of local sort of data sharing scenario, which can be done over a local ad hoc network with those vehicles in it. So data flowing and data moving around is the heart of the technology that we really are talking about here today, and that's the most important piece.
And that's actually a really good segue. Starting with you, Thomas, where does RTI come into play here? Can you break down how Connext is helping enable all of this data flow for all of these kinds of systems?
Sure. So RTI's DDS solutions move data throughout the system, right? That's basically what we do, right? We can move it around within a vehicle, from vehicle to vehicle in the field, or from the vehicles up into the cloud, right? And that enables the innovation to be built on top of that sort of data structure that we provide. The publisher subscribe architecture in DDS enables the data to flow and be available to all applications within the system that need it. For example, GPS data can be fed to autonomous drive control locally that controls the motion of a vehicle to sort of centimeter or sub-centimeter accuracy. At the same time, that data can be sent to the cloud to be combined with other data, such as dose rates for fertilizer, so the farmer can extract maximum productivity from their acreage. The beauty of this system, and to go to the theme of the podcast, right, software defined, right, is that once you've got these systems and these systems are software defined, if a new application is introduced by an over-the-air update or even in the cloud, it triggers a discovery event on that data DDS network, and the DDS middleware will automatically flow the data that the new application needs to it without engineers having to get down into the weeds and the plumbing of moving the data around. That's how we really enable sort of the innovation to be brought into these systems continuously over time.
Yeah, my thoughts are, when you're leading a large team and they're working on technology and you're trying to differentiate yourself from competition, et cetera, you're always looking for a way to optimize your workforce and determine, okay, what do I need to do because it adds a differentiated value versus what can I offload? So if you can have a company like RTI take on some data architecture, some communications protocol, taking care of that part of your system, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you let them take that over? They've got a lot of experience so that your team can focus on some of the core differentiators for the product you're building.
Yeah, from there, taking a step back from a broader industry perspective, Nancy, what does it actually take for companies to turn all of this data into real actionable insights? And are we seeing some meaningful progress in that area yet?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the main thing is engineers love to innovate. We all like to see cool new things happen. That's great to do that, but you have to do that with the customer in mind. You have to think, okay, what is it that my customer can't live without, but also what could they actually pay for and get ROI out of? So whenever you're creating new innovation, make sure that it's adding that value and it has purpose. And then it'll be mutually beneficial, for the customer, for the environment, for the company to create that innovation. And I think as you've heard a few of the examples, and we could talk more about it if you want, but there are many examples of how that's happening today in ag.
Thomas, in a time like now where technology is evolving so quickly, AI is seemingly everywhere, we're just in such a rapid pace of tech innovation. What does it really take for a company to build an effective approach to innovation from your perspective?
I think it's pretty simple, right? Build a platform, not a point solution, right? Be software defined, right? Software defined doesn't lock you in. It actually enables innovation through the software layer, enabling the hardware that you've got underneath it, right? More importantly, enables the pace of acceleration to be increased. You mentioned AI, right? There's some mainstream automotive platforms that have just literally come out this year that are sort of software-defined platforms, and they've got a lot of AI features in them, AI voice recognition and stuff like that. The important point with that was that if you go talk to those engineers that built those systems, those AI features weren't on the product spec sheet when they architected the system like 3-4 years ago. Right, they've literally come in the last 18 months, 2 years sort of thing, right? So when you actually build a true sort of software-defined platform, you can put whatever you want on top of it, and it actually enables the rate of innovation to be much, much faster than you have done before.
I think maybe the other thing I want to mention there is that you have to have a strategy for your future that is really going to add value, but you also have to be agile. Like Thomas said, you have to change your plan. If something new comes out and you can add more value more quickly, you've got to be able to respond to that and create that value rapidly to really get that value out in the market.
Absolutely. So as we wind down the conversation here, last question. Looking ahead, what emerging technologies or trends in ag are you most excited about over, say, the next 5 to 10 years? And what should we be paying attention to? Nancy?
I think the evolution and the continued expansion of automation and autonomy paired with AI is just going to be super powerful for the future. All that data that people have been collecting for 20 or 25 years, using some of that to draw insights that today we might not even be capable of knowing ourselves as humans, how we can extract some value from that. But with some of the AI algorithms, we'll be able to realize different types of value. The other thing, and I mentioned this earlier, is that constant connectivity. If we could have constant connectivity, it will change work sites, whether that's a farming work site, a mining work site, a construction work site. Imagine the reduction of waste you could achieve if you knew where every vehicle was and you knew when you wanted it to be there, and you could communicate and bring it in and make all of that flow so much more seamlessly. I think those are a few really great opportunities for the future.
Yeah, and Thomas, I know I've asked you your opinion on the future of automotive many times, but if you could break out your crystal ball one more time and give me your opinion about the future of smart agriculture in the next 5 to 10
Well,
years.
I think I agree with Nancy. I think the things I'm interested to see come to fruition is the combination of actually AI and data resolution. As Nancy said before, right, every pass makes the next one smarter. So as we build up 5 years, 10 years, 20 years data on a particular field, it's going to make us smart as we move forward. Combine that with AI and also the resolution of the data, right? Now we might be collecting data on a square yard basis, right? What happens when we can get that down to a square foot or even an individual plant, right? See and Spray only sprays the weeds today, right? What happens if I can have a machine going across the field that looks at each individual plant and then decides, hey, this one needs a bit more fertilizer, that one's fine, and really increase the resolution on that. But then you can actually unlock even more savings and even more efficiency for the industry as well. So that'll be pretty exciting to see that.
Absolutely. Well, that's a wrap for today's episode. A huge thanks to Nancy Post and Thomas Bloor for sharing your insights. I really appreciate the time and your perspective, and I'm excited to see where this space goes. Thanks again for joining us.
You bet. Thank you.